I heard that we are live.
You heard that we're live? I don't know. You maybe get your ears checked. Anyways, welcome everybody. This is DGG Presents Random Encounters. And we've got a few topics on display, but rather than dive into them right now and tell you what they are, this is Random Encounters, so they come up as we go. So first, joining us as always, Brian.
Hey, I am Brian, known just about everywhere online as Bjark the Bard. I write over on my website, Bjark the Bard, providing DMing tips, in-game tips, running group tips, you name it. Sometimes I will just randomly talk about food. And I also recently was one of the writers on the premier heist book for the month of February, Beyond the Golden Vault.
I love
Because sometimes you just need to go beyond it. Yeah.
With the shade and the dig. Perfect. All right, and special guest this time. We're going to start off talking about something that they've got going on. But Lion, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Lion. I'm the head for Tales from the Table Studios. You can find us here on Twitch and YouTube, and over on Twitter at my personal Twitter, TheLionKnight42. We do actual plays, are working on releasing some content for use at your tables, seeing YouTube videos and other ways of finding ways to help create platforms and opportunities for people in the community to present their stories and insights and information.
That's awesome.
Absorb.
That's really
All
cool.
Right. So first thing on the docket is the charity stream coming up at the end of March. So what's the deal? What's going on here?
Well, so Days of Tales 2, as I have called it Eclectic Boogaloo. It is a charity stream we're running March 24th through the 26th. It's going to be 36 hours of actual plays. We have a couple panels. We're going to be doing giveaways and more, raising money in support of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Wow, that's amazing. It's really cool.
So
yeah, Oh yeah.
No, go for it. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say I'm really lucky to be in the position that I am to be able to do it. We did one back in July actually. I always get the two mixed up because we did more charity stuff after that. But we did one back in July and it just went so well. That one was for the National Network of Abortion Funds. And it just went so well that it made me realize this is something we could do, more often, and it's something I really wanted to make work.
So you've got a long period there of like panels and games and streams and stuff. Do you have any more information about who's doing what, or if you're looking for any help still from anything?
So right now we still have our casting call open, actually, which you can find over on Twitter, and I think will pop up in the chat in a second.
Yes.
Do it. Up until this Monday coming up. Yes, up until this Monday coming up, we're going to be keeping that casting call open. We're still looking for players. We're still looking for GMs. Anyone who's interested in being involved in any way with giveaways or stuff behind the scenes or looking to help, that's the best way to go about it. Just fill that out. We're going to be looking it over probably on Tuesday, and then we'll have a lot more of an idea of what's going to be going on. There are a lot of games that people have floated that I'm really, really excited about having. Obviously there's going to be some of the big games that everyone recognizes with like VTM, Vampire the Masquerade, like 5th edition, Pathfinder. Eclipse Phase is one that someone's mentioned to me that I'm really hoping we can get going. And then we're also going to be doing a lot of the smaller like indie games because, again, one of our big things is always platforming creators and people who want to present their stuff to more people. So it's a really good opportunity to do that while also supporting a great cause.
That's really cool.
So yeah, if you've got some time, or even if you aren't sure if you have time, go check that out. See, maybe you'll be able to play in a game. Maybe you're someone that can run a game. Maybe you can help out with something else. Like doing things like this, there's a lot more work on the back end and behind the scenes than you can imagine.
There's a lot of time and hands involved.
Yeah, and, very much so. I will say that I learned that the hard way when we did the first one, because it's a really funny story. So with an unfortunately not funny beginning, right?
Yeah.
What happened with Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court. Yeah. And I was just like, I can't. I should have asked this before and I apologize, but can I curse on occasion? Is that okay? Do we avoid
Go
that?
for it.
Yep.
Okay, I was like, this is fucking unacceptable, and I got to do something.
Perfect. Yep.
And I just threw it out there, and I'm like, okay, we'll get a couple of people will be involved. We'll do like a day of games or whatever.
Yeah.
Like 3 games will take up a full day. And we got like 50 people signing up in the course of like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm like, well, we're gonna have to do a lot more than that now. And I just had no idea what I was getting into, but it all came together so well. And it worked out because I was able to really sit down and spend countless hours on organizing it.
Yeah, so like even if you're not like an on the camera type of person, if you've got some skills in, editing or helping manage streams behind the scenes, or scheduling, just kind of reaching out to people to be like, hey, this game's gonna be at this time, you're involved. Those sort of things might seem minor, but just somebody helping with that is such a huge deal behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've been a part of a few charity days, and I'll tell you what, the ones that have someone doing stuff behind the scenes like that
They go so much smoother.
much more smoothly, and like the feeling is just a lot less chaotic to them.
You don't have everybody racing to the wire to try to get all of the overlays set up, and it's a thing.
Oh, absolutely. It is a lot. And again, something I learned the hard way because I was doing like production and graphics and everything for the entire first one. And we'll probably end up doing the vast majority of it for this one too. But
That's how it goes.
So if someone's not on... Oh, go for it, Brian.
I was going to say it's definitely appreciated, because I was going to say, when I heard that you were going to be on, I immediately was like, oh, the person that does the charity streams. Like, immediately in my mind, I was like, oh, I know exactly who that is. Charity streams.
Heck yeah.
I'll take that. That's an identity I'm very happy to be able
to.
That is one. Like, there's a lot of identities you can have, but that one right there, you can't argue with. So what I was going to say, though, is if anybody's watching this and is not on Twitter, do they have a way they could reach out to you with questions or to sign up or anything as well?
There's a couple of ways that you can go about getting in touch. We have a Discord, and I'll link the invite in the chat as long as that's all right. Mm-hmm. You can also send me an email at thelionnite42@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Any of those are good ways to get in touch.
I love it when things are just like the same across multiple, because it's so much easier to remember rather than having to be like, switching things around or, using part of a name.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that becomes such a giant nightmare.
Yeah. I think we have... Yeah, we couldn't get Damn Good Games on Twitter, so that's why it's just Games Damn. But everything else, you search Damn Good Games, it's us so far.
So far. We haven't had too many bots yet, but I imagine that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean there was a thing a couple of months ago, right, where just random
bot
versions of accounts were popping up.
Yep,
everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
We didn't have one because I remember I was looking for it and I was like, do I feel bad about this or not? I was like a little bit disappointed there wasn't one, but at the same time, it's like there's not one. I don't kind of worry about it.
Yeah, it's so funny because I had a similar reaction where I didn't think I had one, and then someone's like, "Hey, do you know this exists?" And I'm like, "No, I had no idea that it would be even remotely like important enough for that to have been done." But okay.
Oh, whoops! That's not. Oh, it worked. Okay. Sorry, I was clicking on the Discord link myself, and now I've got to go through the windows and do all that, and I'll do that in a minute. Anything else you want to throw out there about the stream, or anything like specifically maybe that you would like someone to maybe reach out if they have the ability to?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for more people who are interested in working on production or are working on like stuff off screen, backstage, because that takes a little bit of the pressure off of me, so I'm not having to do 36 hours of running these games and stuff. But there's always more we can do, and even if you feel like never feel like you have nothing to offer, right? Like that's so important. There's always something, and we have spots everywhere. Scheduling, reaching out to people, even just like keeping chat going during the games, being a presence there, that's so important. And that's one of those things that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
something that we really, really do appreciate when people do and are always looking for more people to do it.
Yep.
Similarly, even if you're not interested in running games or playing in games, don't be afraid to send us a message and be like, hey, do you guys have anyone who might want to run this game? Because it's something that we'd like to see or that we don't see often. Because that's another great way to, get stuff on the platform. Because I think just more of these games, especially indie games, just do not get enough love. And thankfully, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but with everything that happened with the OGL recently, there's been a lot of that sort of push for more of the indie games to get more exposure, and that's
Mhm.
really cool. And that's something that,
Yeah.
again, if you have a game that you're like, hey, we really want to see this get played,
Yeah.
let us know, and we'll try and find a way to make that happen.
Heck
So
yeah.
what I'm hearing here, Don, is for maybe the first time in our lives, we were doing something before it became popular.
Yep. I know, right?
It's kind of funny because last 2 weeks, or maybe we had a gap in between, I don't remember. I think it was last 2 weeks, though. We did a play test for a game called A Divine Calling, where you go back to playing like a high schooler chosen by a god. It's an indie game. And so Don and I were reminiscing a little bit. And of course, Don said it back in the 90s, which was, we were the tail end of the 90s was our high school time. But, it brought back a lot of like memories and some
Yep.
jokes and different things. And so now I'm like, we're still going on that trend now. We were streaming indie games and boosting them before it became popular. You're here first.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, with what Lion said, that applies to us as well. If for some reason you're joining us for the first time and you're not sure what we do outside of what's going on right now, that is our main shtick. Is we take indie games and we do actual plays of them. And our favorite thing to do is bring the creator on as well and have them
Yep.
either run the game or play in the game with us. And then we just show what the game is, show a quick
Yeah.
one shot ish of it, and just
how quick it is to just jump in and play a lot of these games, because a lot of these games do something that's usually really, really well, extremely well done in the niche that it's going for. And that's not something a lot of people who are used to 5e can see very often, because like a Divine Calling, it's a great like high school Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of feel to it. Like it's got that going, and the bones in it are really good for that specific purpose. And so it's just fun to show people all of those different aspects of games.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure.
And
There's it and it's another thing that I feel like gets lost a lot of the time in the community, is at least in the more mainstream parts of the community, is this idea of like a game should be able to do anything. And it's like, well, it's cool that there are games that can do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But the way that a lot of indie games will, like you said, fill this niche and carve it out and really flesh that particular part out is so awesome, because you will get more of that feeling than you will if you take a system that can do anything and socket it into that setting or premise or concept.
Yeah.
Also, I absolutely will
Oh,
have
yeah,
some
100%.
people to recommend to you after this, as far as like
yeah, awesome.
designers and stuff.
100%. And like if anybody's listening, we're also not worried about doubling up. Like if you do it on Lion stream, we'll still do it on ours. Like we don't care. Our goal is to get exposure out there for these games. You know? And so
They need it.
Like we don't care if it's been ran elsewhere, done elsewhere, we're still gonna do it too. It's that's just how it is. It's been a lot of fun experiencing. Like Don and I were two different sides of the coin going into this. This is Brian's laughing too. He can see that. Don is the systems nerd. He loves learning new systems and reading about them and like seeing how they work and seeing how they tick. Where I'm sitting here like, okay, I need time to like figure this out and set aside energy and do it. So it's been pushing me outside of my comfort zone, which has been a good thing. And even though sometimes I'm like stressed out in the moment while we're doing this a little bit, it's they like I have never not had fun.
Yeah.
And we've been doing these for like about 8-9 months now.
I've actually been pleasantly surprised with quite a few of them that have come on stream. I'm like, I have never even thought about doing things like this before. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, That's one thing that I'm really grateful for, being in the community and having the ability to talk to a lot of the creators that I didn't even know were around before. Is when I first like popped up about a year ago now. I was very much the like I want my games to be crunchy. I want to have a lot of like math. I want that. And I am almost a completely different person now, where it's like, give me Powered by the Apocalypse. Give me
story.
Yes, I want the story to be what drives our narrative. I love things like that, and I love seeing things that aren't just roll the die, do this plus this, resolve your action. And there's just so many cool options out there.
Yeah.
So this is kind of segues a little bit. We're not going to dive into it yet. I'm going to say it now. That way, if people have questions or things in the chat, they can think about it and put them in. But one of the other things we're going to talk about today kind of ties into this, because with all these indie games, these ones filling these niche roles, there's a lot of them that are rules light and easy to learn and easy to pick up and easy for players to dive into. But they create a new hurdle and a different experience for the GMs that are used to 5e or Pathfinder or 3.5 that are more crunchy systems.
It is a swan dive into the abyss of improv.
So
Absolutely.
part of what we're going to go over later on this stream is like some tips that we have to help new GMs or GMs that are not as good at the improv be able to run those games and feel more comfortable running them and not freaked out or stressed out about how do I do this. So if anybody in the chat has any questions about that or anything, or I'll check Twitter just to make sure, but put those in there and we'll see what we can do about them. Now, we're not saying we're masters or we're perfect at it.
Nope.
But each of us have done that, and so we can share tips that work for us, because some people run those systems wonderfully and it's their favorite thing, but when you put them within a structure with more rules, they have issues. And some people love that structure and they thrive in it, and so when you take them outside of that, they don't know where to go.
Yeah, you get the analysis paralysis thing where
Yeah.
there's too many options, so you don't know what to choose, and then the anxiety just builds and builds and builds and builds.
All right, so the topic before that, though, is, as Brian mentioned when we got into the stream, the premier heist book for the month of February and moving forward, Beyond the Golden Vault. So
the only one you need.
The only one you need. Available on DM's Guild. It is under like the new hottest items thing, so it's pretty easy to find. I am in the middle of checking it out. Dawn and I are actually going to do a review on it later. There's a lot of good stuff I've already seen. I think Brian just posted a link to it right there in the chat. So this is a community collaboration again, much like Nocturnes and Nightmares, but I feel like this one has even more people involved. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say we had more people involved this time. With Nocturnes and Nightmares, it got a lot of people like really liked it, and more importantly, the entire team that made Nocturnes and Nightmares really enjoyed working together, really enjoyed putting our creative ideas together and making something, and then seeing this amazing looking finished product. So we decided we wanted to continue working together, and one of the first ones we decided to do was, well, like, let's go alongside what Wizards is doing. And when they did their announcement in December, we saw Keys from the Golden Vault and was like, oh, they're putting out a heist book. I like heists. Let's do heist stuff. And everybody's like, yeah, let's do heist stuff.
Heck yeah.
And this is where it evolved from. It's like Nocturnes and Nightmares. It's a little bit of everything for you to run heists at your table. You've got subclasses, you got spells, you got magic items. You have wonderful and crazy locations, from a airship casino to a museum that's a little bit crazy to a vault.
Yeah.
In the far plane that actually the treasure is the minds of exceptionally interesting individuals. But we have everything, little bit of everything. So you pick this up and you will get everything you need to kind of lean towards the heist side of games and running your games at the table.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep, I definitely need to read that.
Because I'm part of the way through. I may be repeating it because my multitask focus was a little off as I was posting on Twitter there for a second. But yeah,
Juggling!
I've gotten through the backgrounds, the stock characters at different level tiers, the spells and the magic items, and there's a lot of things. And like Brian mentioned this before stream, and so far I've read through, and my favorite spell in the entire book is the first level spell. And it is definitely a first level spell, but it's a first level spell with a very guided upcast. I'm not going to ruin a whole lot for it, but it is there, and this was a real chance to let divination magic shine, right, Brian?
Right. Oh, yeah. And that's something that I realized when we started working on this is we started looking into because, everybody loves new spells.
Yeah.
But we wanted these spells to be unique and feel very heist-like, and we didn't want this to just be another assortment of spells that you could do stuff. So we started leaning into what would you want with a heist? And of course, divination magic comes up. And then you look at divination magic in 5e as written, and you're like, there's not a lot there. So we really got to go a little crazy with the divination magic.
That's
and
really
it was a
cool.
lot of fun.
I always really appreciate it when content gets released, especially for 5e or Pathfinder, where it's more focused than just here's a bunch of really cool ideas. So I really do appreciate that concept of we want our spells to feel heist focused because we're doing a heist book, and not just here are some cool spell ideas we had. So that's really neat. And like you said, divination never gets enough love.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the group that worked on this, the fellow content editors and our project manager Anthony did a fantastic job of just kind of making sure that we stuck to that, because we're sitting there, we're creating ideas, we're throwing everything up because we're excited, we're creators, we like creating stuff, but you would look at things and go, does this really fit into what we're trying to do? Is this of the quality that we want? That came up a lot in the trap section, which I had a lot of fun with that. There are some very crazy traps in there.
Making sure that the theme and tone is right on those is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find, for me at least, when I'm writing stuff like that, a lot of the time you have to I have to actively work to not get caught in that loop of this is a cool idea, well, it doesn't really fit here, how can I make it fit here, instead of going, let's put this to the side and we'll come back to it when there's something that it will be good for.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, you just end up with a pile of stuff that I'll get to this eventually. This was a funny joke that I came up with 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure it's going to fit somewhere because I never made it fit in the time that it was built.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You got something?
I was going to say,
okay.
But yeah, Beyond the Golden Vault, definitely take a look at it, pick it up, and. Like I said, I had a blast working on it. There are some amazing other creators that really got to shine in it, and it's just, again, if you have Nocturnes and Nightmares, it's similar to Nocturnes and Nightmares in length and that really nice quality, and you are not going to regret this purchase, especially if you love heists and heist movies.
Yep.
Everything heisty.
And
click the link. Click
it's something specific like this is really missing from the 5e genre.
Oh yeah.
I think all of us probably have ran some sort of a, maybe not like an exact heist, but a stakeout or a sneak in somewhere and get something, which is basically a heist. But we've all done that.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of us have either house ruled or home brewed or done something to go outside of the rules, so it wasn't just roll stealth, roll sleight of hand, roll a dex check, to make it a little bit more exciting and different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have such a soft spot. So sorry. I'm okay. I have such a soft spot in my heart for heist themed stuff. So like this is already like an instant win in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to be in my collection.
And like this, even from what I've read so far, like one of the George in chat has mentioned like all of his heists turned into smash and grabs so many times. And that's just kind of where it goes because it gets kind of dull or it gets kind of like the pace is too slow. And so the player's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna boom. And so
Or,
there's
These
a
are-
lot
yeah.
of
or it's the something happens, but that's always the twist in the heist when everything kind of goes sideways. Like,
Yeah, just 5e as written is kind of hard to I know I talk about this in the book a little bit. It's hard to kind of have the, oh, but I prepared for this. Let's do a flashback. Oh, like we've run up against these guards. Don't worry, I intercepted their barrel of wine. And I put a little bit of sleeping potion in that. So it's going to go off in 3, 2, 1. And then all of a sudden, you come back and, oh, look at that. Passed right out. We didn't fail that stealth check. And it's hard to do stuff like that with the base game. So it
yeah.
needs a little bit of massaging, a little bit of tweaking. Like I said in the chat, we have mechanics in the back for general heist running that kind of walks you through doing the prep work, and then some general tips for running it and how you can run it, and some tools that you can use that just kind of help you focus on that fast-paced action where time is critical, but at the same point you can bounce back to the preparation if you want to.
Yeah. And it's something
really.
I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's something that I think 5e rules is written very much does push you towards run and smash things, take what you want, leave.
Mhm.
And in order to like do a heist with all of that pre-preparation, it can so often turn into these just grueling sessions of staking things out and standing there and waiting and
Yeah.
nothing happens and figuring out this one thing and then going on a whole side quest to spike the barrel of wine. So that's a whole session out the window for that. And
Yeah.
it doesn't
Oh,
really
yeah.
lend itself to what you want from a heist versus just a robbery because they're not the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, you almost need like elements from the Forged in the Dark system where they
Mhm.
do
Right.
the plan is just an aspect. It's kind of the direction they go to, and then you have flashbacks that you can buy.
Yeah, it's so funny actually that this is all kind of coalescing the way it is because we've been over in our Discord talking a lot about Leverage, which is an old like heist show, and
I
we're
love Leverage.
oh so good, and we're working on putting together like some community games, and there's a Cortex system Leverage game where they do that, and they handle very well the idea of the flashbacks, and it's like no one wants to spend all this time planning. Go do, and there's a whole like mechanic for flashing back to things that you would have had to be prepared for, and it's just great.
George, you're not old enough to know what leverage is. Get out of here.
That's what the internet is for.
Yep.
That's true.
Let
Well,
all the
because-
old people wax poetic
Yeah.
about it, okay?
So we had Don and I and another friend of ours, Russell, and then George played with us, and he's like, he mentioned in the beginning of the stream, he's like, this is like a lesson in the '90s because unlike the rest of these people, they lived it. I'm just a baby. So, yeah, George, get out of here.
I don't like hearing that. Listen, the 90s were only 20 years ago, at the most.
At the most. We'll do it there.
Just like the 80s were only 30 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about.
See,
That's how it works.
the horrifying thing to me is I talk about the 80s like my parents used to talk about the 60s when I was a kid. And now I understand the look that my kids give me. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing it, aren't I?
Oh, there was this.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go for it.
I was just gonna say my oldest daughter, about a year and a half ago, for some reason I cannot remember why, the Backstreet Boys came up, and she goes, bless her heart, she goes, huh, I know they're really old. They're probably dead now.
Oh,
No.
And I
This
can
is
feel
where-
my
this is
bones
where-
turn to dust.
This is where we need a technical difficulties thing. We can flash up on the screen, Don, while we just feel old about it right now.
all of the old
Oh.
guys just fell over. Just, "No!"
I'm falling
Don't
and I
say
can't get
that.
up.
My inner child's like, no.
Oh no! I was gonna say that was like there was recently a "Never Have I Ever" retro meme that was making the circles around on Twitter, and score a point for everything you've never done. Yeah, I scored 0.
Yep.
Yep. If it's the same one I'm thinking of, I saw it not too long
Yeah,
ago. Yes. Yep.
The use a rotary phone, listened to music on a vinyl, listened on a Walkman, that sort of thing.
Yep. That's the one.
Used a
I miss
rotary
my
phone.
Walkman. Yeah.
Old school rotary phones.
Oh, that would have been a good one to do. I guess it's not retro enough, but yeah, Jesse in the chat was like, they had to explain what T9 was to someone the other day.
Oh,
There was a moment where I was like, "What's T9?" And then it hit me, and I was like,
mhm.
When it took you 5 minutes to text a sentence. Yeah.
Yep.
There were some people I knew that like
Just
they were wizards with T9.
Yeah.
I just-
Oh yeah, and
Yeah, it's like,
one-handed, too.
wow.
They didn't even have like the keyboard on the phone. They were just one-handed. Just
Yep,
boom.
just
On the number pad. Yep. I could never
They,
do that.
they had it like almost like an index in their head, what every number of push was for each character. That's just
Yep.
a T9 Morse code style index. Boop, 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 boop.
that's how we can confuse them.
Oh, perfect.
Oh my god, you could.
Bring back T9.
Yeah,
It'd
use
just be
it,
different tones of beeps.
use it for like a sci-fi D&D setting for puzzles. Just T9.
I might
Hold
have
on,
to
I'm writing
use
that
that.
I need a,
Yep.
I don't have a pen right now. I need a pen right now.
Sorry, it just
I
came
have
to
a
me. I'm
button.
like, the door code. They have to figure out T9 with the door code.
Absolutely brilliant.
See, now I'm just imagining 20 years from now, there's going to be people who are our age now talking about something like this, but instead of T9, it's going to be emojis.
Yep. Oh, don't get me started. I could talk about emojis all night. What a fascinating concept.
Right? It's like reverse pictography.
Hmm.
We're reverting. The written
Well,
language,
you know,
the written word is suffering, so because we're going back to pictures.
It's just how things evolve. That's just how it goes.
The most simple.
Listen,
and
sometimes you-
streamlined is
you just-
usually the one that evolves. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say sometimes you can't express what you need to express without saying like skull and bones, upside down face, explodey face, smile, rainbow, tuna fish. Like, and that's like, you send that and they're like, oh, I totally understand you. And you're like, right, transcends written text.
Yeah, memes are a really good example of that too.
Yeah.
Because like,
Yes.
I have full conversations with my kids through memes where we'll just text back and forth a bunch of memes, and we've had a whole conversation in half the time it would have taken for us.
Oh my
to have
god,
that
memes and
conversation.
gifs.
Yep.
Yeah. That,
Oh,
see, now you know why the Egyptians were so keen on it.
I mean, any like game that there's a Discord channel for that I'm in, I create a meme only channel now.
Yep.
Because
Had to do that too.
Otherwise, it's just out of control.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah,
lose
just-
everything. So you need that channel just for the memes and gifs. That way,
Yep.
everybody can get them in there.
Yep.
And yeah, George and I have done GIF conversations for hours before during games and outside of them. That like no words, just GIFs.
I like to do
I-
that when I'm running a game. I'll be sitting there running a game and my players will be doing something, and we usually have a Discord chat going up because we play virtually.
Mhm. Yep.
And like every now and then I'm just like, this GIF is perfect, and I'll throw it in there. And like I watch everybody's heads turn and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
No, go back to figuring out the puzzle. Don't look at the skeleton GIF I just sent you.
So what you're saying is that I need to have like a screen share of memes on the side of my actual plays. So Just the
just like the chat bar on our,
yeah.
on our thing over here right now. Just have it be like the memes and gifs that are going on. Nope, it's on this side.
That's actually quite brilliant. It's like in-stream entertainment, just this meme stream going on the side.
For when
That's
combat
their-
gets crunchy.
Oh yes, yeah. Where somebody's sitting out there doing stuff, and we're just sending stuff back and forth. And sometimes you just get that golden meme where you're like, "This summarizes everything," and everything stops, and you just go, "How did you come up with that?
Yeah.
How did you find that? How did it fits so perfectly?"
Yep. The tentacle memes are pretty common.
Oh.
Yeah,
like
Jeff missed the
anytime-
game, and in my home game that was virtual, and like he comes back and goes, "What happened?" Because the meme thing is just all of this god awful tentacle stuff and chocolate.
Oh, that's
and-
the best when like somebody didn't make it, and they're like, "How do I decipher this? What happened?" And you're like, "Oh, I'll tell you. I'll tell you tomorrow. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It'll all make sense. It never makes sense."
No, it never.
Or if you miss a week and you go back to the channel and there's your recap, you just have to decode it.
Decode the session in memes.
I know it's telling me something. I just have to figure it out.
If I just stare at it long enough, it'll speak to me. Okay. Well, now that we've been derailed a little bit,
Just a little.
as it
All the
happens.
best conversations.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, check out Beyond the Golden Vault.
Heck
And
yeah.
tell them what you think. Submit a review on DM's Guild.
Yes, please.
Even if you hate it, submit that review and tell them why.
Yep,
Not just
feedback.
not just it sucks. I don't like this because blah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean we'll generally respond if you give us constructive feedback and just kind of explain things and kind of like get where the disconnect is on that, because we're a group of creators, but we're only so many eyes and so many viewpoints. There will be people that come from the outside and look at this and go, "I don't understand exactly what's working here."
Mhm.
And go, "Well, like this was hard to understand." You're like, "Oh, well, let me explain that to you."
Mhm.
And that's another thing to point out for those small creators that have just one or two people creating something. Get eyes on your creation that are outside your close group,
Oh yeah.
because people
Feed-
people have different experiences, different ways they look at things. Like we have 4 of us on here, and the 4 of us could each easily interpret a sentence in a different way
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
with the same exact sentence. And so getting more eyes on your work before you release it, or while playtesting, that are people you don't know are outside your group, is going to
Yep.
strengthen what you have. Because
And the
Dawn
less-
and I,
The less
Dawn-
bias, the better.
Dawn and I, this happens a lot where Dawn has something and I'm going through editing it and reading it, and then I'm like, okay, what does this mean? He's like, oh, it means this. I'm like, well, that's not what this says right now. we've had so many conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff that
We've done it enough that we're not afraid to tear each other's work apart, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So make sure you find people that are unbiased, that are willing to give you real feedback.
Mhm.
And
Oh
and
yeah.
don't be
Friends will
afraid
be
of
nice.
yeah, and don't be afraid of the criticism that comes in, as long as it's
Mhm.
obviously constructive and respectful. But bad reviews are not a bad thing always, because they give you opportunities to see what you've missed and where you can improve, or even
Yeah.
just build communication with other points of views. So
Yeah,
don't let that hinder you from releasing your content or from checking on it and responding to people. It's so
Yep.
important.
as a very famous person put, if you release your content and you're not at least a little embarrassed, it was probably too late.
And I believe, Brian, you actually have an entire blog post about feedback. Is that right?
I do. That was it was at the beginning of the 1D&D series.
Mhm.
Right. We talked about that on one of our
yeah.
first random encounters, actually.
Yeah, and it's feedback is so useful. Like we've all said, feedback is useful. Positive feedback. As long as it's framed in a positive manner, where it's like, well, I didn't like this, but this is why I didn't like it.
Yep.
And I see what you were trying to do, or maybe even I didn't understand exactly what you were trying to do. Maybe you could explain it to me a little bit more. and I could understand it.
Yeah. For real.
Because I know there are things that I do where, in my mind, because of how my brain works, it'll make sense to me when I say it a certain way. But I will pass that to somebody else, and they'll go, "I have no clue what that means. What are you talking about? You're not specifying this thing." And I'm like, "But it makes sense." They're like, "No,
Yeah.
outside of your brain, it doesn't make sense."
Yeah, and I mean it goes back to your own personal translation of the information. Like for me, and this is something I got nailed on when I was going to college a lot, is I would write my sentences in a circular argument because I was used to having conversations that way, where you would explain what you're talking about and then you'd return to it again by the end. And so that was a really tough habit for me to break. But I mean, it's just things like that you don't realize until somebody else reads it and goes, "What?"
Yeah, and Don still sometimes falls into that trap, but not very often anymore.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, when you have positive feedback,
You can fix
say what you like and why. Like, people love seeing, "This is awesome, this is great, I love this, I like this, do more of this." That's all fine and dandy. But if you really want to help them out, tell them what you liked or why you loved it. Because, okay, like if we take Beyond the Golden Ball, you tell them you like it, you love it. Cool, that's awesome. We know this is there. But if you tell them why, that then allows for further creation down the road because they know what people like and what they don't, and ideally what they don't like as well. So that just makes a better product, like either updates or edits to the existing product or something else that comes out.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. The ability to look back and be like, "Oh, well, this worked really well here. This is something people liked, and this is why. Is there a way I can implement similar concepts in whatever else I'm making? Or even if it just happens to work out that way, you can lean more into it."
And is that linked?
I mean,
the blog post.
Yeah, that's to the art of feedback. So that kind of it goes over my thoughts on it. I originally made it for the 1D&D playtest, just because I saw a lot of people were just saying, give feedback. You have to give feedback, and I was like, well, like partially for me and partially for anybody else. Yeah, what is good feedback? Feedback is one thing, but good feedback that actually gives you things to think about or adjust. You can actually do something about that.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've got the feedback talk out of the way. I do it, like, seriously. That is, if you want to support small creators or any creators, that is, and you don't have the money to buy things, but you've got the ability to read something, or you can only buy one thing, that is supporting them almost more than your money is in a lot of situations, honestly, because that gives them the motivation or the drive to push on and continue, or to just make better, like release better products.
Yeah, and update existing things, especially if there's something critical that they missed. Because then, especially digital products are pretty easy to pull back, make a quick adjustment, and re-release. Like it's not super challenging.
All right, so now let's move on to the first, maybe only topic of the night. Let's see.
We'll see where it goes.
But yeah, just some tips for GMs running these rules light, story driven, open ended games that are coming out. And these tips that you're going to get can also help you in those crunchier games, or and also in those games, like, I'll be honest, I haven't played Vampire the Masquerade since, I believe, 2nd edition, back in like 2000, the early 2000s. But that game was a little bit more story driven, but it still had the crunch. And so these tips will also work for those games to help you become a better overall GM. And I'm going to start with something real basic. And, you might be like, scoff at this, or you may be like, well, how still? But one of the best things you can do is to dive into one of these.
Yep.
Regardless of how scared you are, regardless of how outside your comfort zone you're going to be, you're never going to not be uncomfortable if you don't try it and do it.
Yep.
You can do all the prep, read all the notes, find all the tips and guides that you can, but it's still not going to feel natural or come easily until you've done it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I will suggest a game that Don and I have. Well, we played it actually. We didn't run it. We had another person come run it, and the creator played with us. But it's a game called Brains and Brawn. There's a bunch of other things out there for it, but this is a really simple rules game.
Mhm.
Like the base game is free to pick up, and it is 2 pages for your rules.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things that are left to creativity, imagination, and improv.
Yep. I even wrote a zombie adventure for that. That'll eventually be out.
Yeah.
Ooh, exciting.
And so some of these games like that, the wider the rules are, the harder it's going to be as a GM
Mhm.
because you have to have that creativity and improv. But taking these games that do it can be so much more fun, so much story driven. And if you're like, especially if you have like a long term campaign and another system that's a little bit crunchier, using these as like intermediaries and one shots is a good way to break up the monotony. I feel like I'm promoting everybody here, but Brian also has a blog post about, I don't remember what you called it, but about doing these other things to help preserve a long-term campaign, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's I have a list of all of my articles on one of my numerous screens. So I'm looking through here and I'm like, what did I call that again? Broaden your
Yeah.
horizons.
Yep.
Yeah. And things like this can just help. It's a nice brain break too, especially if you have and you're in a really tense part of your other campaign and you got to break that tension and do something a little more lighthearted. These games are a good way to do that. And especially as a one shot, in a one shot, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes as the GM that much.
Yeah. You're just playing to play.
You're playing to play, one and done. So do these as I say, just dive into a few one shots.
Yeah.
That's like the kiddie pool. That's like dipping your toes in the water.
Growth comes from experience and failure. These are the two things that will help you grow.
Don't say it. Sorry.
What?
Failure is the best teacher.
I was trying to stop that line, but you didn't use the voice, so we're okay.
I had to. Almost.
I knew you were going to. That's why I was like, no, don't. But Ryan, you can keep going by all means.
Oh, okay. Just making sure. Yeah, I mean, look. The worst thing that can possibly happen is you run this as a one shot. You stumble a bunch. You come away from it going, what could I have done to prepare better? What could I have been more aware of that would have made it less of a concern that I would be stuck in a moment going, I don't know what to do now. And that's why you're not playing it on stream. You're not like playing it for money. You're sitting down with friends and you're doing this, and they know that you're trying this. This is new.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen, and you learn from them, and it's great.
Yep. Don't have any skid marks. Just go off that cliff.
You got to commit.
Yep.
So on the heels of that, Don, what tips do you have now?
So every time I run any one shot, I always reference one of the same documents that I've referenced probably for like the last 5 years, and it's called the 5-Room Dungeon.
Oh yeah, classic.
Yes.
So the reason why I reference that is because any one shot or any open storytelling kind of game, you can break each session up into 3 to 5 scenes. And with storytelling and narrative heavy, your encounters are going to be much longer. Weirdly, without the crunch, they tend to last longer. So usually you get about 3 full scenes per session where people are doing things and things are being accomplished. Did I?
Brian?
Can I hear y'all? Okay, cool.
Hello?
Yeah.
Phone is Brian.
It got so quiet.
I'm checking for questions on the Twitter just to make sure.
So quiet.
Yeah, no, it's a really good tip, and you brought up the 5-Room Dungeon is so good because you can really socket it into any aspect of playing games, and like you said, yeah, with the narrative games, you're gonna have a lot more like space within any of your scenes. So it does allow you to really, and that's such a. I'm so hyped that you brought that up because it's just such a good way to do it. It was one of the things I was thinking about mentioning. It's such a good way to do that.
I feel like this happens every time we have, like, it happens a lot with Brian still too, but I feel like every time we bring someone else on this stream, Don, you say something and they're just like, yes. Like
And it just works.
you mentioned something you use and they're like, yeah, they have like this whole rapport between you two that just jumps in on that.
Yeah, and I like the arguments for the 5-room dungeon because you don't need long dungeons to build like that feel, that theme, that strength. Like mega dungeons are cool if you're doing like a serious crawl and you're doing all the crunchy stuff, but in narrative games, 5 scenes or 5 rooms, that's gonna fill a pretty decent sized like section of a story.
Oh yeah.
Did I already throw it to Brian to give a tip as well? I can't remember if I
No,
sidetracked
you
this again or not.
Sorry.
Okay, so Brian, your turn.
So I guess my tip would say, kind of have an idea going in what your GM strengths and your GM weaknesses, well, not weaknesses, GM challenges are, and how that's going to come into play in the game. Like you said, like with these narrative heavy games, maybe like you really like doing the improv, you love yes and you're really good at it, but you fall flat on naming. Like somebody asks you a name and you're like, Bob
the Fourth.
and it's just Bob, and then you take it the next step and you go, well, what can I do to shore up that challenge to put myself into a better position? Can I, and with the name thing, it's as easy as you can simply just write down names, write down a list of names. You can get fancy, get a name generator. There are wonderful ones online. But I find that really helps. And it's something that can take some time, understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at, or not as good, and just figuring out how to shore up those areas where it's going to be a bit of a challenge for you to keep going.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're going to stick on what Brian said there for a minute, simply because as you were saying this, a question came in on Twitter about how do you make the names, how do you make them not seem like Boblin the Goblin over and over again? So you gave a little bit on your end from that to help with it too. So identifying a GM challenge with names. We talked about name generators; those are good. One thing I've heard that people use a lot too: baby names.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Find a list of baby names.
I'm also going to edge in here. If you want to come up with a way to make kingdoms or crazy sounding monsters, just pick pharmaceutical commercials drugs.
Yes.
That was the other one I've heard recently.
I do that all the time. I do that all the time.
It works great for kingdoms or weird demons or spirits, like anything that you want obscure sounding. Like it's perfect for it.
Yeah. The two things I would add to that are, one is also cast lists. Go look up movies you enjoy, at least for modern names, and a lot of them you can also take and kind of warp. But go look up movies that you enjoyed. Look at the non-actor list of staff. You can pull names from things like that too pretty easily.
I like that.
And also I happen to also be kind of a word nerd. And I love diving into the history of like how words are formed, and that's another really cool way that you can go about exploring it. Because that can just what is this place? Why is this place? Okay, cool. What would a word be for that? What would a name be for that? Where does it root from? What would it be similar to? And go from there. And I also really enjoy doing that. I funnily enough, as much as I am, like I said, kind of a word nerd, I'm terrible with names. So I always have a list. I will spend way more prep time than I should just cultivating lists of names that I can pull from, so that in the moment I can just look down or look on my screen and be like, that's the name. That's what we're going with. Done. And then you just cross it off and move on.
And lately, Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, go for it.
I was going to say, lately I've been stealing something that Glenn Cook does an awful lot. And what he does is personal names aren't often used in a lot of his books. Instead, they're descriptors. So, for instance, a town might be named Charm, or a person might be named Candy because they're actually really sultry, or, things like that. They have almost like handles more than names, because personal names are something only family members use oftentimes. And so you can build that into the culture. If you aren't great at names, you can keep it really simple. Like the blacksmith, his name is just Smith in that town, or Tanner.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do, and that's what everybody knows them by. So, I mean, you can do that kind of thing as well.
We've touched on it too, but I'm just going to reiterate the pre-generate lists somehow.
Gary Gygax's Book of Names.
If you struggle with names, the best thing you can do is just have a list that you can pull from, and if you're creating an NPC, even if it's on the fly, I mean, every one of us can attest to this. If you do not have a name prepared for that NPC, the players are going to ask them what their name is.
Every single time, without fail.
It's nice to meet you. Who are you? Damn it.
And if you prepare the name, there's about a coin flip chance that they won't ask.
Yes.
Or they'll make fun of it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
A follow-up to that is, if you prepare the name ahead of time, say it out loud a couple times. Like, say it out loud. Really think about how it sounds. Like, if you end up making something that, you can't really pronounce, that's not going to work. But more often than not, if you make a name that turns into a euphemism really fast, like
Jagged,
it's like you're
Hoff.
You know what you're doing. Like, you know what you're walking into, and your players will absolutely jump on it every time.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
like this hunter. His name is Jagged Hoff. You're done.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. I hope they weren't important.
Yep.
And to tag onto what Brian said too, maybe run the name, like say it out loud to somebody else.
Especially a middle schooler, if you can find one. Hey, what do you think of this NPC? Okay, that's not going to work.
Well,
I mean,
that name's going in the garbage.
Yep.
You still see
that's
all the
when
time
you make a note, right? You make a note of that name on the do not use list.
Exactly.
And that's just another thing too. Is you see it happen on live streams all the time too, or even pre-recorded actual plays and stuff like that. There's a name, and then in a way you don't expect, either because of how the name sounds, or maybe you're using an accent when you say the name now,
and you're
that changes how it sounds.
Yep.
I mean, I've seen that quite a few times where if you just say the name normally, it's fine.
It's fine.
But once you throw an accent in there,
oh, it's all over. Yep.
All bets are off.
Yeah, that's 30 minutes of the session you'll never get back.
30 minutes, if you're lucky, it'll come back and bite you again down the road.
Oh yeah.
Then
5 sessions later,
they'll want to find that NPC again for something, and it's going to be something inconsequential. Doesn't matter. They just want to find the NPC to say the name.
Yep.
Or to make you say the name, or whatever. Yeah, that's how they remember the name outside of the group note taker. Yes, true, but at the same time,
it's not what you want them to remember the name for.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially if it's somebody really important in the story.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so with names, any last little parting things about names? I think the list thing, saying the name out loud, and also like saying it to someone else, and also spell it out, I think, is another one too. Like, make sure you look at how it's spelled, because if it's something the players are like, oh, how do you spell that? And then they start writing it out, because if it's one that you think they might misspell and could do a problem, tell them how to spell it without them asking.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will say along the same lines are, after you have used a name, if you're using it off of a random generator, make sure you write it down somewhere.
Yep.
because the names that you will forget the most are the ones that you pull out of the blue in the moment, and then they're gone for 6 sessions. And when your players run into them again and are like, what was their name? Shit.
Yeah, that comes to another really important DM tip with narrative games. Take notes.
Yes. Yep.
Take lots of bullet point notes, because it is so hard to track what has happened 2 weeks after a session and you start another session.
And you'll also find that taking notes with these like narrative heavy, like story driven games permit you a lot more open space to create in, right? Like I really like to lean on Powered by the Apocalypse as a concept for
Mhm.
this, where they do the whole play to figure out what happens, right? And I really love that. And if I can kind of throw in a tip here that sort of enmeshes with this one, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Like follow your players, right? If you aren't necessarily great at improv, but you want to do these games, there's only so much you can write out, because a lot of it will rest on what your players do, where they go, how they want to engage with things. Follow them, listen to what they're doing, listen to what they're saying, build off of what they're telling you they want to experience and explore. And by taking notes of these things, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, when you sit down with your notes, you'll have all of these bullet points of, here's what they want, here's what they're excited about, here's what they latched
Mhm.
onto. Great, that's what I can write about, and that's what we can tell our story about, because they've told us what they want that to be. They've let us know where they are focused.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to
And-
piggyback off that as well, because that goes into kind of another point I was going to make, is you can also lean on the players a little bit to help you in these games.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
one of the things I like to do this in, like, 5e as well sometimes, but these open-ended games, like I want to do this. I'm like, okay, what does that look like?
Yep.
I do that
Yeah,
all the
like,
time. In
I'm
Yep.
every game,
gonna like sneak up behind this person and take them out. Okay, how do you do that? What does it look like? Like, describe it to me. And then that gets them involved, and like anything can like give a little bit of a jolt to your creativity as a GM.
Yep.
Like you may not expect it, and something happens. You're like, oh, and then you've got something to go on. So if you let the players also be creative and improv things from time to time, you can oftentimes intentionally build off that, or it'll spark something in you to help go somewhere else with it. Like maybe they're trying to do this, and then there is a role involved, and they fail, so you have to build off of that. Or maybe they do that, and there isn't a role, but you've got, okay, what you can start thinking, what's the effect of that? Maybe they've taken out that guard. Does somebody check in with that guard on their walkie-talkie all of a sudden after that guard goes down?
Yep.
And then you give a whole new set of things that go in that could set into play.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. The thing that I really like, and I think is really important to keep in mind for narrative games, is more so than a lot of the crunchier games, is that playing is a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just you presenting the situation and presenting the world and them exploring it or running through your story. It is a communication between you and them of where you all want this to go and how you want to do the things that you're going to do and how you want to interact with the things around you and even what the things around you are.
Yep.
That's all a conversation in these like narrative driven games.
Yeah,
You create it together.
they're way more collaborative.
Yep.
And I was going to add to that, the first step your players give you to tell you what they want is what kind of characters they've made.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If you're a planning GM and you're playing a narrative game, just review the characters that the party has made, and you will see exactly what kind of story all of them want you to help them tell.
On the same vein as that, if I can jump on one
Yeah,
more
do
thing.
it,
I know
do
we
it.
keep like daisy
Do it.
chaining these.
Yep.
Do
it.
This is something that like anyone who knows me will tell you that I almost like actively work to find reasons to shoehorn this in everywhere, because I do think it's really important. So like you said with the building characters, session 0, even for one shots, session 0 goes so far, because even beyond like the safety tools, because like obviously the safety tools are super important.
Yep.
But there's other things that happen in session 0. And here, when you're doing these narrative driven games, you're creating the characters, you're talking about what people want to see in this game, what they want to explore, how they want to do that, why they're making the characters they're making, and having that discussion. And that will also give you so much to build off of for how you want to present things to them and where this story is going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
So
I try to. I
do it,
was going
Brian,
to say
do
real
it.
quick.
Do it.
That's whenever I do any sort of campaign prep, I try to get my players to do at least a little bit of their character creation at the table together, because I find that one, you end up with characters that can be intertwined with one another because somebody will get very excited about an idea and build
Mhm.
off it. And two, I find that you just end up with a more cohesive party. Because everybody kind of knows what's coming to the table narratively, mechanically, whatever. And, you're going to have less doubling up. You're going to have people that, they flesh it out. They know what they're going into.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is kind of like, once again, adding a little chain to what we've been building here is going back to the last game Don and I did, that Divine Calling game. Part of the game itself, in the rules, there was this thing about creating a web to interact with the characters and
Yep.
also the NPCs. So they wanted you to create like one or two
A relationship
NPCs,
web. Yeah.
a relationship web.
Mhm.
And that right there also tells you a lot about, okay, they've got a connection to this NPC. This is the connection. They're connected to this PC. This is the connection. That gives you more that you can go off of. And these session zeros don't have, for these open like rules like games, don't have to take very long. Like you can do a session 0 and then play and still not have like a huge long night. So this can give you stuff to work off of because they're creating their characters. You can be sitting there taking your notes as the GM or whatever they title it for all the games. I actually kind of love these different titles that the different games are giving to the GM. It's not just GM generic. It's something tied to the game itself. Like it was Lore Weaver for Divine Calling. Brains and Bronze is Tale Teller. Like I love all these different things. The creativity is there. But I digress. Take those notes as you in that position running the game of what they're doing, what they're seeing. We've said that before, but use that time to help you write some stuff that you can bounce off of or go back to later.
Yeah, I can't sing the praises of like the relationship webs enough. It's a must for me at the very, very least when I run any vampire game. But like for so many other games, I also have just like variations on how I design those. But they're so good, they're so easy to reference, and you can fit so much information into them in whatever way that you put them together.
So before I dive into Jesse's question in the chat, I think Brian's excited about it there. I think
he's
Brian
like, "Oh boy!"
I saw it and was like, "Oh."
I'll throw it to Brian first.
I'm excited for this one.
Before we dive off into that, anything else that we want to add to the current chain we've created here?
I did post a link to a really cool drawing tool called Draw.io, and what that'll do is create PDFs of graphs really, really quickly, and it's easy to use if you're building webs at home for narrative games.
And like this web was part of in the design of this game we played, but you can use it in any game.
Yeah.
And I actually highly encourage it. Like the first time Don did these relationship building things in one of the games he did, I was really kind of blasé about it. Because some of them like, this doesn't really fit anything I've had envisioned for my character. But when it's a little more open-ended, you can do this and it's a great tool. And it doesn't have to be in depth. Like they don't have to have the backstory of how these people have known each other for 3 years. They met doing this, and this happened to them, and this happened to them, and this happened to them. Like, for example, what we did, we just had simple connections. Like my character in the game was connected to one of the other characters because he was a stage manager and the other person was a theater kid.
Yep.
The two other ones were connected because one was a dealer and he was a supplier to one of the other ones. Simple, quick, easy connections, and then the players can use those connections down the road to develop more about what happened in the backstory. But they don't have to give a 3-page dissertation immediately.
And as a GM, it helps you see the important NPCs in the initial setting that you can build onto. And that can help drive the story if you need it to.
Yeah.
All right. So all of you have seen the question by now, because even if you're watching the VOD, we've got the chat on there. And so you've seen it pop up. So you could also kind of prepared yourself.
Dun
But
dun dun.
this one I think is, I mean, I don't know if I'm using the hot button term right or not, but this is a big one. This is something that, yes, all of us have experienced and everyone will experience at some point in time.
And it's
So
hard to deal with.
yes.
Oh
So
yeah.
how do you handle as a GM or whatever when you're challenged on your call during a game? It's really easy for the entire momentum to be stopped. It's just true, and taken out of the immersion of the game when these happen. So, Brian.
So this is something that I've actually had to deal with, because I play with a table of a lot of other DMs, and we all love DMing. We all like different parts of the DMing. Some of us really like the rules, but I mean, the 5e core rules are vast and all over the place and terrible to reference. So you might forget something along the line.
Not to mention slightly contradictory in some points.
Yes.
Yes. Something that I like to do ahead of time is I like to, and this actually goes well during a session 0, is kind of talking about how we're going to handle this if it comes up. Where, if you're a newer GM and you have a more experienced player at the table, maybe it's a seasoned GM that's like, here, sit in my seat for a while, do the things. Here's the curse, you have it now.
Side note, even though Brian did say a curse, do that for your GM. If you're running a long game, even if it's a one shot, offer to just do something real quick to give them a break. We love getting a chance to play when we can, even if it's just a one shot here and there. So do that. It is better than bringing snacks to the session.
Infinitely.
Okay, sorry, Brian.
That's fine. That's fine. So yeah, you set that up in session 0, and you can go with a policy as easy as we can. If I make a ruling that you don't agree with, we'll note it, and if it's game changing, we'll come back and I will happily retcon that. I will, if I find out that my understanding of the rules was different and it cost you something valuable in your character, or worst case scenario, it caused your character to die, we'll retcon that. I have no problems with that whatsoever. And then when it comes up in the game, I try to keep a timer on it, because I find anything longer than about 30 seconds to a minute, and you can go less than that. You'll lose the momentum as you have people pulling out their phones and jumping on Reddit and going, well, this Redditor said this 3 years ago, and they're like, well, Crawford said this tweet and he said that this is how it's supposed to work, which, I mean, that's all good and everything, and that's something that can be discussed before or after the game, but I don't want to be referencing a game designer's tweets from 3 years ago in the middle of, life or death combat.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say my final thing is, and this is kind of hard when you're a new GM, is at some point in time, your interpretation of the rule might be different than their interpretation of the rule. And then you just have to explain, well, this is how I interpret it. I'm running the game. If this is a real problem, we can discuss this. But I'm the DM, and this is how I think it works. And again, if that's something that's going to vastly destroy one of their plans, or they've been building up to this for a while, say, you know what, if that's the case, miscommunication, let's work to fix it so you don't feel like you've wasted all the stuff building up this thing that I've just slapped down. And that's everything I have to say on that.
I'd love to jump behind that, because again, a lot of that is so adjacent to what I was going to say. I mean, obviously, first was session 0, which again I bring up every opportunity I can. Look, session 0 is
so important.
It's so important for so many reasons, and this is one of those great reasons where you get to outline, here's how we will handle when this happens, right? You'll also get to be like, okay, look, here is how I am going to be running things. Here's how I perceive things. If at any point this comes up, we can discuss it at some point. Obviously, not in the middle of play because, like you said, it's just going to derail things. I think it's also really important to make the distinction between like challenging a call and trying to understand the reasoning behind it, which also can take you
Yeah.
out, and you have to be really careful with. But because I've been running games my whole life, right? And
Yep.
there have been times where people will flat out be like, "That's not how it works. I don't accept this," and it's like, well, that's one issue, and then there's, well, I was thinking of doing it this way. This is how I understood the rule,
Yep.
and these are two very different situations that can be handled
Yep.
really differently, right?
Yeah.
Not just because one is obviously more confrontational, but just because of how the perception of the way the game works within those expectations.
And a
It's
lot
so
of those are largely the difference between whether or not it's a GM sitting in as a player or a brand new player is trying
Yeah.
to plan something and didn't realize they misread something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
One of the things-
detangling that is really important.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do a lot, and I will try and always do in my session zeros, and anytime I have a new player sitting down at my tables or someone I know has been playing for forever, is I'm like, I'm a pretty flexible DM most of the time. I
Same.
am willing to let you be like, if you can sell me on why you would have it work this way, let's concisely. Let's do it. I'm so cool with that. I want you to feel
Yeah.
cool. I want you to feel like a badass. I want you to feel like the things you've put this time into do come into that like victory you're looking for. I want that for you.
Yeah, just make a
but
case.
yeah, but if in the 20-30 seconds that we're discussing it, I still feel at the end of it, this is the way that it needs to be done mechanically because I feel like it is. I am more than happy to have that conversation with you after the game. And again, we can retcon it, we can go back, we can do whatever. But this is how we're going to run it for now. And we'll go from there. And I would argue that pretty much anytime you're sitting at a table with players in good faith, that will be a reasonable outcome where your players, even if they're a little bit upset because they couldn't do the cool thing they wanted to do, will understand why you're doing it because you've already discussed it in session zero. You've made it clear
Yeah.
here that we're not done. You're not saying my word is final, let's move on. You'll just have that conversation later. And I think as long as you put those things up front and as long as you communicate and are very open about that, and you give them the chance to speak without taking away from the game or the other players, you're good. That should be what happens. And if you have issues beyond that, I feel like that's something else that will need to be addressed for completely other reasons than we disagree on this ruling. What do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on where it's coming from, like what the context is, in my opinion. But the vast majority of it's going to end up being like, hey, if this isn't going to completely derail the story or plot at this point, let's put a pin in this and discuss it after the session.
Yeah, that's a big thing to do is when you can. There's a lot of situations that'll come up like that where you can do that. You can put the pin in it, come back to it later, and that is okay.
Mhm.
And it is also okay in my mind to be like, I'm not sure if that's how it works. Rather than stop the game right now to figure this out, let's come back to it.
Yeah, we'll
It
just
is
go
okay, it is okay as someone running a game to say you don't know or you're not sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
If anything, I think that helps you in those situations because people
absolutely.
don't think your players aren't going to think you're power tripping.
Yeah,
Like,
you're just
running the
making.
game, you know all the rules, you're making all these decisions. You know, just be.
That's a good life lesson.
Yeah, honestly.
Absolutely.
Be honest.
Honestly.
Be honest when you don't understand things. Don't pretend that you know things.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well, because that's
And-
how you learn, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah, exactly.
learn by hearing and being taught things that you don't know or understand.
Yeah, you could be like, hey, look, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to go ahead and rule it like this for now, and we can reference it when we have some time.
And
Yeah.
don't be afraid if you think that the person who's challenging you does know the ruling and you're new and aren't really aware. There are times where there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, cool, thank you, that makes sense, and then going and checking it afterwards. And if it's
Mhm.
not,
Yep.
Great, that's fine. You can still move along and
Yeah.
reach out to them and be like, hey, I checked. This is how it works. I was right, or neither of us were right, or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's how we'll be doing it moving forward. Or being like, hey, thanks for that. I'm new to this and I'm still figuring it out. That was really helpful. And go from there.
Yeah.
And in extreme situations, like, feel free to disagree with me on this because I've never brought this up before or really talked about it. But in my mind, in extreme situations, if you need to, it's okay to pause the game,
Yep.
break immersion, take a break, and talk it out with that one person. Let the other players go to the bathroom, get some snacks,
I've had to do
whatever's
that.
whatever's
Yeah.
got to happen, or even just that session ends there, and you talk with that player and spend that time. Like, that's not ideal, but
Yep.
sometimes that's better than letting that discontent or argument or something stew and build or continually take away from the game that's happening.
I've actually had to stop a game because it happened between two players that got into it over rules. And unfortunately, the campaign did not survive the contact. But we just had to pause everything and discuss it, and the players wanted two completely different things out of the story. And so sometimes they just have to take their separate ways. And it's nobody's fault.
Go.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was just
I'm
going
write
to
myself a note.
really quick. I was just going to jump on that and be like, it's important to remember that not everyone is going to be able to play at the table with everyone else.
Exactly.
There are times where people will want different things out of a game or out of a story, and it doesn't mean that you or your players or anyone involved is failing in any way or doing anything wrong.
It just doesn't
Sometimes-
work.
Yeah, people are looking for different things and it doesn't work. Like any other relationship, romantic, friendly, otherwise, anytime you're in a situation with other people, there will be times where you just have to be able to go, we are looking for different things and want different things and we'll be doing other things. This won't work. And that's okay.
Yep.
And like, kind of on
Yeah.
that too, is everyone has somebody they know, I'm sure, that you can't really put a finger on it, but you just aren't fond of them, or they just, upset you or aggravate you more easily than someone else.
Mhm.
There are different people, people have different personalities and they don't always mesh. And
Yep.
you can, like, if you've
Yeah.
got random players or, a table at a con or something like that, those are things that'll happen.
Yep.
And sometimes the players just can't, like, not only are they looking for different things, but just their personalities are not going to mesh well and they can't be at the same table together. It's not that either one of them is bad necessarily. I mean, it might be, but it's not
Yeah.
that they're bad, but just sometimes conflicting personalities just don't work very well.
Yeah.
And you just have to acknowledge that and go separate ways.
Yeah, I mean, and if you spend enough time with the same small cluster of people, conflict will be inevitable. So make sure you
yeah.
recognize that for what it is as well, because it may not be directly game related. So
Are
Yeah,
we still
yeah,
talking
that's-
about TTRPGs or are we just talking about life now?
It's- I mean,
It
really,
overlaps so
Sure.
much.
group
Yeah,
dynamics
yeah.
is group dynamics.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and understanding conflict management and how to resolve it. It's tricky, like you said, it's tricky. And if you play with the same people or you just play, it's gonna happen, and you're gonna
Yep.
have people that they can identify when they're getting frustrated, why they're getting frustrated, and very respectfully, like, put it to the side, bring it up later, or when they're wrong, they will admit it. Or you'll have players that they don't do that, and
Sometimes you
it
have
takes-
to, yeah.
Yeah.
It just won't work.
Yeah, and that's
And it's-
really rough.
It's
Mhm.
ugly. It's really ugly.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it can blow a table up. Like it can blow up real friendships and cause problems.
Yeah.
And
If
I've
that
seen it.
happens, yeah, one of the best things to do is just take a hiatus.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
something like that happens where it's very emotional, is to just be honest with your table. Just say, I need to step away for this amount of time, or I'll let you know when the game comes back up. we can do this other game in the meantime. There are all these wonderful indie games that I buy because I've wanted to play them. Let's cycle through that, or let's just do board games or hang out or whatever. But it's like I need to step away, and just acknowledging that you need the space or you're going to burn out.
Yeah, and
Go
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope.
Go for it, Lion. Do it.
Go for it. Well, we're on here all the time. We can take a backseat occasionally.
So something that I would expound on for that is, one of the most important rules. So I have like a rules list that I go over when we do session 0 of like expectations and things like that.
Yes.
And one of the things that is always there is, respect the players. Sure, respect the characters, respect the story, respect the players. And that comes in so many different forms, right? That's not just don't be a jerk to each other. That's including things like sometimes when things like this come up at the table and emotions get high and people get invested or emotional, you have to be willing to go, I need to take a back seat, or someone else goes, I need to step away, to respect that and give them that respect to go, okay, cool. What can we do to help facilitate that in whatever form that looks like, if at all?
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna piggyback off what Brian said too. Sometimes, as a tool, if you notice tensions between players, you can play the hiatus card as the GM, even if you don't need it.
Yep.
For the good of the table, if you know that, like Don said, if you have people that have played together for a long time, conflict's gonna arise.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just gonna boil over for different reasons, and these people are fine with each other; they're still friends. But maybe you think it would be a good idea for the game to take a hiatus, for this tension to break, or this conflict to cool down. That's another tool as a DM saying, hey, I need a little bit of a break because stuff's coming up, or I need to do some planning. Does someone else want to step into the seat for a little bit, or do we want to do something else? Or, I think that's another good way to use that tool.
And don't be afraid to reach out to them, between games as well. As the GM, you absolutely can, hey, I noticed that this happened. I wanted to check in, see how you're feeling, see how you're thinking about everything that's been going on, see where you are.
Yep.
And you can do that on both sides without having to call anyone out or do anything in public or make it a situation. And that way you can also have that understanding when you present more of the game, more of the story, or if you do want to take that hiatus.
I was. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Okay. I was going to